So, you've had the Quebec mosque attack. Turns out, right-winger. Am I surprised? No. Look, we've had, really, since 9/11, there has been a massive hate boner against the Muslims, pretty much since then. And the right wing and the even further right extremists have always been painting Muslims as if they are literally the Manchurian candidate ready to pop off at any moment. There has been, literally making them the other. Because when you make someone an other, it then becomes alright to call them racial slurs, have, fear against them, have, attacks against them. The mosque in, that centre in Quebec, for ages, has been a constant barrage of death threats. It's had a pig's head put on their doorstep during Ramadan, graffiti. The mosque in Texas that got burnt down, burglarized the week before, had continuous problems with people spraying, hateful slogans on the side of its wall. Where does all this come from? It's because you normalise hate. And the problem is, a lot of people really don't see bigotry when it is really bigotry. And the problem is it comes to when it's talked about religion. Now, I'm an atheist. I think all religion is ridiculous. I don't care what it is. If you want to practice it, though, have at it. I don't care. As long as you don't hurt anyone in the practice of your religion. Now, you come on and you say, as most people do, well, what about all these things of, the problem with in the Quran of Muslim supremacy and this against the Kufa and things like that. Well, look, I live in the UK. I've lived in a lot of heavily populated Muslim areas. I've never had a problem with Muslims, ever. But I have seen the flip side. Because I've lived in these areas, I have friends who are Muslims. I've lived in Leicester, which has a big Muslim and Sikh population. And I have seen the flip side of this. I have been walking down the street with my friend, and then he gets, a racial slur, Muslim, racial slur thrown at him because he's a Muslim. And this isn't just a one-off occurrence. This happens all the time on a regular basis. You get the other argument is, oh, well, they self-impose exile on themselves. Well, okay, you're a Muslim moving into a Western country. Where do you want to be close to? You want to be close to a mosque. Well, guess what? Large population of Muslims happen to congregate around mosques. Second reason, you probably want to, because you've come from a Muslim society, you probably want to go and move into, the closest thing you can to a Muslim community. That's not surprising. Third thing, if you're a Muslim, and people say, oh, not these high-end, well-educated Muslims, I know both kinds, shall we say. And if they did move into a predominantly Muslim area of, a low housing, shall we say, stable area, what happens to them? They get abuse on a daily basis. One guy I know had pig's blood thrown at his windows and doors purely for the fact he was a Muslim, by idiots. Because we've allowed this hatred to seep into society for at least the past decade, if not 2 decades, really. And it's been, people allow it, because, and it gets normalised. And then you get things happen in Quebec. And then what do you think happens? Is it any wonder that the last two terrorism attacks we had from Muslims in the UK were both people who were born and raised in the UK? They got radicalised. Why? Because day after day they experienced what I've just said to you. They experienced hate on a daily basis from, us. And then that makes people easier to radicalise. And this is what I've been saying constantly. This whole Muslim ban will encourage radicalisation within the US. And I don't want it to happen, but it has literally started a ticking time bomb of sooner or later someone in the US who is no doubt a Muslim will get radicalised and will do an attack on the US. Because 90% of all terrorism is not exported terrorism. It comes from a citizen within that country. And because the Muslim community has been literally the target of so much hatred for the past 2-3 decades now, is it any surprise that it's so easy that these guys end up being radicalised? And what more happens? That cycle just continues over and over again. And then you get things like happening in Quebec, which was a terrorist attack. And I'm glad Canada is calling it out for what it is. So, this is what I'm trying to get at, people. And I've been trying to get out in at least 2 other videos. The more hatred, the more hatred there is out there against that community, the easier it is for the radicalisers to seep in and radicalise them. It's not rocket science, but for some reason, people don't see it like that. They instead see it as, oh, it's not our problem as well, it's a Muslim problem because of their religion and refusal to integrate. But, as I've said, if you know or you have Muslim friends, you've seen this happen. Or you've had this conversation with them before. But it's not just Muslims this has happened to. I had a friend, he was French. He was walking home one day, got jumped by thugs, basically for being a foreigner. But this is the problem we are trying to fight and trying to nip in the bud. It's hatred. And you do not fight hatred with more hatred. I mean, imagine if for the past decade that there had been the same animosity and vitriol against the Muslim community as there had been against the Jewish community or a certain Christian sect of community. What if we decided in the England that we were going to decide to go after Baptists the same way that newspapers, the far right, if people have gone after, Muslims in the same way. You're going to breed hatred from them, and it's going to result in terrorist attacks. Because we made it easy for, the radicalisers to get into the youth, which it most predominantly is, to radicalise them, and then they go off and do attacks. Now, I hope I've set out my point of literally what happens, but that's the truth. And the quicker we come to realise that, the better. But until you solve that problem, then we're just going to be sitting on these ticking time bombs of not only, potential Muslim extremist terrorist attacks, but also right-winger terrorist attacks. You know, I'm so thankful that we haven't had the type, you know, the Britain First haven't decided to get, you know, actually violent. But, you know, that's because they're idiots, and I think, thank God we, you know, live in a country where our racists do seem to be genuinely idiots, so at least that's one good thing. So, do you agree with me? Or do you think, you know, I'm wrong? Do you think we need to find a way to stop basically this hatred that is being, you know, targeted against, you know, the Muslim community? Because I don't think until we can stop that, then we'll be, you know, people will be live, you know, free and easy then, I think. Even though they should now, because again, the chances of a terrorist attack are incredibly low, but terrorist attacks do happen. So, what do you think? Let me know.